So, good day everyone. We are the Group 5 and we are here to report about the Philippine Constitution, the 1987 Constitution. So, let's welcome the team members. We have Jamala Sheen Gabo, Shaya K. Roble, Dinah Jean Aliposa, Ella May Salazar, Liza Villarin, Nilin Zulueta Ricabo, and Rachel May Humao as Valencia. So let's now first tackle about the first part, which is the 1987 Constitution, and what is this all about? Before that, we have to know first its preamble, which is the introductory part of the document, stating its aims, the purpose, and its justification. So we, the sovereign Filipino people, imploring the aid of Almighty God in order to build a just and human society and establish a government that shall embody our ideals and aspirations, promote the common good, conserve and develop our patrimony, and secure to ourselves and our posterity, and the blessings of independence and democracy under the rule of law and regime of truth, justice, freedom, love, equality, and peace, and do ordain and promulgate this Constitution. So to better understand what is the preamble trying to say, then we have to dissect each of phrases. So the phrase "the Filipino people" it signifies the oneness and the solidarity of the Filipinos as differentiated from the word like one of the people of the Philippines, which may include like other inhabitants or like aliens or something. So a sovereign people intended to emphasize that the Filipino people in ordaining and promulgating the Constitution do so on their own authority as a sovereign people without the intervention from the foreign power. Next is the belief in God was also stressed. So the reference to the Almighty God points out that the religious nature of the Filipino people, as they acknowledge the existence of the Supreme Being that guides their destinies and the destinies of their nation. So the entire preamble is like a collective prayer to this Supreme Being, recognizing Him as the source of the authority to promulgate or to publicize or to promote the Constitution. So the Philippines is also, like we all know, it is predominantly Christian nation, and its people believe in the power of really prayer. So the next one, there are also changes in the preamble from the 1973 Constitution. It was notably changed into the 1987 Constitution. So among the changes are the following insertion of the phrases: to build a just and human society, which makes it clearer that the adoption of the new Constitution does not only seek the establishment of a new government. It is said to be the one where every individual, regardless of his station in life, is treated fairly before the law, and where special concern is given to the poor and the less fortunate, so that, like the rest, they may be able to attain a decent standard of living. The next changes is the phrase "the rule of law." It is a reminder to everyone of the nation's like sad experiences under the authoritarian regime, which has been accused, among others, of numerous violations of human rights, election frauds, like graft and corruption, suppression of dissent, and other repressive acts. So this is where like the martial law. So the next changes in the preamble is the word love as a principle together with the truth, justice, freedom, equality, and peace to stress the need of a sense of love to bind all Filipinos, especially during these critical times when armed conflicts and intense political rivalries still continue to divide our nation. And the word independence was also emphasized that ours is really a free nation which does not owe allegiance to any superior foreign power. So that's it. This sums up all the preamble to understand it more comprehensively. So next, let us now tackle about what is really the 1987 Constitution all about. So the 1987 Constitution, it is established a representative democracy with a power divided among three separate and independent branches of the government. We have the executive, a bicameral legislature, and the judiciary. So now let's tackle about the executive branch. So the executive branch carries out and the one who enforces laws. It includes the president, the vice president, the cabinet, the executive departments, independent agencies, boards, commissions, and committees. So the president is the head of the state and the chief executive, but he is still subject to significant checks from other branches, especially in times of emergency. which, given the history of the country, was obviously intended to be a safeguard against a repeat of Marcos martial law despotism. So, for example, in cases of national emergency, the president can still declare martial law, but not for a period longer than 60 days. Congress can also revoke this decision by a majority vote, or it can also extend it for a period to be determined by the Congress. Additionally, the Supreme Court can review the declaration to decide if there were sufficient facts to justify the martial law. And the president can also grant pardons and amnesty, which is to grant someone who is convicted of political actions. He is also empowered to make or accept foreign loans. However, he cannot enter into treaties without the consent of the Senate, so he cannot do some agreement with other countries without the consent of the Senate. So the president and the vice president are elected at large by a direct vote. But the president may only serve one 6-year term. So the cabinet is consisting of the president's advisors and the heads of department is appointed by the president and it will assist him in his governance functions afterwards. So now let's move on to the legislative branch, which will be reported by Nelly Ricabo.
Legislative branch. The legislative power is vested in a Congress which is divided into two houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. The 24 members of the Senate are elected at large by a popular vote and can serve no more than two consecutive 6-year term. The House is composed of 250 elected members. Legislative branch is known as the law-making body because legislative branch makes all the laws, declares war, regulates interstate and foreign commerce, and control taxing and spending policies. And these are the example: the Government Publishing Office and the Library of Congress. Here in the Philippines, the head of legislative branch, this new session started July 22, 2019. The President of the Senate is Tito Soto, and the Speaker of the House of the Representative is Lord Alan Velasco. Next slide, please. Judicial Branch. It is known as the law interpreting body. The court system in the Philippines exercises the judicial power of the government, and it is made up of a Supreme Court and lower courts created by law. The Supreme Court is a 15-member court appointed by a president without need confirmation by a Congress. So, judicial branch is the one who evaluates law. In the Philippines, the judicial branch interprets the meaning of laws, applies laws to individual cases, and decide if the laws violate the Constitution. And in the Philippines, Alexander Gismondo, the Chief Justice, he is the head of the judicial branch, and he is the 27th to serve that position. Thank you. Next, let's proceed to the next reporter.
Next slide, please. So let's move on now to the major subjects or topics in the 1987 Constitution. Next slide, please. So basically, the 1987 Constitution deals principally with the following subjects, which are the composition of the political community, the distribution of power within the political community, the organization of government, and the values and principles and policies. So let's discuss first the composition of the political community, which includes the national territory and its citizens. So the national territory. As what is stated in the 1987 Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, the national territory comprises, first, the Philippine archipelago, and second, the other territories over which the Philippines has sovereignty and jurisdiction. So both of these consist of terrestrial, fluvial, and aerial domains, including the territorial sea, internal waters, the seabed, and other submarine areas. So the next one is its citizen, or us, the Philippine citizens. So according to 1987 Philippine Constitution Article 4, Section 1, the citizens of the Philippines are first, those who were citizens of the Philippines at the time of the adoption of the 1987 Constitution. Second is those whose fathers or mothers are citizens of the Philippines. Third are those who are born before January 17, 1973 of Filipino mothers who elected Philippine citizenship upon reaching the age of majority, and lastly, those who are naturalized in accordance with the law.
So the next major subject of 1987 Constitution is the distribution of power within the political community. So political power is distributed to the people and to the government. And certain powers are reserved to the people through the exercise of their right of suffrage that can be seen in the Article 5, Sections 1 to 2, while certain rights are expressly recognized and protected from impairment as individual rights in Article 3, Sections 1 to 22. So government powers are distributed to the different branches or departments of the government. So these are the executive branch, legislative branch, and the judicial branch. So first, let us tackle about executive branch. So it is composed of the president and vice president who are selected by direct popular vote and serve a term of 6 years. The Constitution grants the president authority to appoint his cabinet. So these departments form a large portion of the country's bureaucracy. So the executive branch is responsible for implementing and administering the public policy enacted and founded by the legislative branch. So another of the executive branch examples of power is the authority to grant a pardon or forgiveness to an individual accused of committing a crime. So the second branch is the legislative branch. It is authorized to make laws, alter and repeal them through the power vested in the Philippine Congress. So this institution is divided into the Senate and the House of Representatives. The legislative branch is responsible for enacting the laws of the state and appropriating the money necessary to operate the government. So the Government Publishing Office and Library of Congress are examples of government agencies in the legislative branch. So the third branch is the judicial branch, wherein it holds the power to settle controversies involving rights that are legally demandable and enforceable. So this branch determines whether or not has been a grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction on the part and instrumentality of the government. It is made up of a Supreme Court and lower courts. The judicial branch is the responsible for interpreting the Constitution and laws and applying their interpretations to controversies brought before it. So these three branches distribute the power within the politically equally.
The next one in the line is the organization of government. So power delegated to government and divided according to the extent of its authority may be either the national or local government. So the national government is in turn organized into executive, legislative, and judicial departments exercising the powers of government according to the nature of functions vested upon it. So I will further discuss this national government because it is discussed earlier by my co-reporters. So special offices have been created for particular governmental areas of concern. Thus, the Civil Service Commission deals with personal matters, and that is according to 1987 Constitution Article 9B, Sections 1 to 8. The Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, deals with election matters, and the Commission on Audit deals with the settlements of account of receipts, and expenditures of government funds or property. And local governments are either regular units or autonomous regions.
So next slide, please. So the last subject that is included in 1987 Constitution is the values, principles, and policies. The goals of the people are declared and principles are established concerning the main areas of government activity. So once the goals were declared by the higher governments, the principles and policies will follow in order to have a peaceful government activity. So the latter goal in turn would involve the first, the promotion of social justice, which is included in the Article 2, Section 10, by equitably diffusing wealth and political power and regulating property and increments terito in Article 13, Sections 1 to 10, and Sections 14 to 16. So, in recent years, the term social justice has become just as prominent as human rights. So, what is social justice exactly? It's essentially a concept of fairness within a society that applies fairness in wealth, opportunities, basic needs, and more. It's expanded over the decades, and now you will hear the term in discussions about gender, race, and the environment. So this will include it ensures that everyone gets the essentials for a good life. It ensures everyone gets adequate health care. It protects people with disabilities and it protects people from religion-based discrimination. So the next one is the development of a self-reliant and independent economy controlled by Filipinos where the private sector is involved and investments are encouraged. It can be seen in Article 2, Sections 19 to 20 and Article 12, Section 1. So the economic self-sufficiency is the ability of individuals and families to maintain sufficient income to consistently meet their basic needs, including the food, housing, utilities, healthcare, transportation, taxes, dependent care, and clothing, with no or minimal financial assistance or subsidies from private or public. So the community development approach builds from and further enhances self-reliance. So self-reliance will build upon strong social structures and increasing levels of economic activity and social and economic links with local communities. So next slide please. So the third one is the conservation and development of the natural resources for Filipinos. So it can be seen in the Article 12, Sections 2 to 4. So building an independent economy means building an economy which is free from dependence on others and which stands on its own feet. An economy which serves owns one people and develops on the strength of the resources of one's own country and by the efforts of one's own people. So in order to build a self-reliant economy, our country has attached primary attention to the effort to set up a structure of an independent economy. So the conservation and the international is working with the government and local communities in the Philippines to protect the country's natural assets, includes forests, mangroves, and seas for the long-term benefit of generations of Filipinos and people around the world. So the main strategy for protecting and conserving biodiversity in the Philippines is the establishment of an integrated protected area system, or which is known as IPAS. So the IPAS was set up to protect and preserve a representative sample of all ecosystems and habitat types in the country as well as their plant and animal species. So the country is widely acknowledged as having an outstanding endowment of natural resources, which could provide essential ecosystem services to the population. So demands arising from development and utilization activities, population expansion, poor environmental protection, and external factors such as climate change.
So the fourth state policy I is the establishment and maintenance of a complete, adequate, and integrated system of education. So it is the right of all citizens to have access to quality education at all levels, and the state has the duty to first establish an adequate system of education, establish free public education in the elementary and high school levels where elementary education is compulsory, and establish a system of scholarship grants, loans, subsidies, and other incentives. Encourage non-formal, informal, and indigenous learning systems. And lastly, provide training in civic, vocational, and other skills to adults, the disabled, and the out-of-school youth. So the fifth is priority and incentives for science and technology. So the Constitution gives high priority to science and technology, research and development, inventions, and their utilization. It supports indigenous, appropriate, self-reliant technology and capability. It also encourages the grant of incentives and directs the states to secure, in accordance to law, the intellectual property rights of scientists, artists, and gifted citizens. So the adaptation and the transfer of technology are to be regulated by the state. The last one is the fostering of a national culture and the arts. So the states is also required to foster the preservation, enrichment, and evolution of a Filipino culture through patronage of the arts and the artists, and to protect and regulate the artistic and historic wealth as well as the rights of indigenous cultural communities to their own traditions and institutions. So that's it. Next reporter, please.
So the next topic is about who are the individuals or person involved in the 1987 Constitution. So it was Corazon Aquino. She was the first ever female president in the Philippines. She began her term by repealing many of the Marcos era regulations that had repressed the people for so long. So Corazon Aquino issued a unilateral proclamation establishing a provisional constitution. This constitution gave the president broad powers and great authority, but with restriction. Aquino promised to use them only to restore democracy under a new constitution. This new constitution was drafted in 133 days by an appointed constitutional commission of 48 members and ratified by the people in plebiscite held on February 2, 1987. It was largely modeled on the American Constitution, which had so greatly influenced the 1935 Constitution, but it also incorporated Roman, Spanish, and Anglo law. So in her reign, resulted the power to be divided among three separate and independent branches of government, as mentioned by the reporters earlier, the executive, the legislative, and judicial. Next reporter.
What are the significance events that had led up to this? So the answer is the February 1986 Revolution People Power Revolution. So on 1986, EDSA Revolution, the world-famed Bloodlust Cup on February 22 to 25, 1986, ushered in a new political regime. A President Corazon Aquino, backed by a coalition of forces from both ends of the political spectrum, forged a new government, triggering a change of events that dramatically changed the political landscape of the country and signaled the rebirth of democracy. These political changes were the abolition of the Batasang Pambansa, following the proclamation of a new revolutionary government, the organization of a constitutional commission that drafted a new charter which in turn was ratified in February 1987, the rebirth of the old bicameral system, and the election of members to the new Congress.
So another significant events that happened in year 1987 Constitution is the integration of gender equality on Philippine Constitute but we are not able to include it in our PowerPoint. So this event seeks to achieve gender equality as a fundamental value that should be reflected in development choices and contends that women are active agents of development, not just passive recipients of development. It also focuses on gender strategy for making women concerns and experiences an integral dimensions of the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies, programs, and projects in all social, political, civil, and economic spheres so that women and men benefit equally. So the importance of integration of gender equality is that it ensures policy making and legislative work is of higher quality and has a greater relevance for society because it makes policies respond more effectively to the needs of all citizens, women and men, girls and boys. So societies that value women and men as equal are safer and healthier. And gender equality is a human right. So that would be the end of our discussion about 1987 Constitution. I hope you gain knowledge and thank you for listening.